to do something that is different. And you look at all the heroes, and that's what they do.
The commitment to listen with the same passion with which we want to be heard.
In terms of who do you want to be, articulate that. Find the words behind that. Who do you want to be?
Welcome to another episode of the DNA of Purpose podcast. Now, as our regular listeners would know, the DNA of Purpose is a podcast that explores purpose in its many expressions, from personal purpose to organizational purpose, social impact, and even movement making. The fact that we interview extraordinary humans of purpose is not necessarily unique. There are now millions of podcasts out there doing exactly that. But what has been amazing in my journey of interviewing these incredible guests is observing the patterns in these people, the way that they operate, harness energy, and use purpose as a life force to break through glass ceilings and to create epic ripples of impact. And what I want to say is that those patterns don't always reflect the traditional processes or ideas that we have about the role of purpose. Because in my view, and I've said this a few times before, purpose has an expanse that is so much bigger than simply being able to articulate your why. It is something that connects us deeply to who we are with, and where we are located. For all of those reasons, when I came across the work of Brave Spaces, I knew that I just had to get inside the mind of today's incredible guest. His name is Andrew Leach, and he has combined his expertise as a psychotherapist with a deep understanding of ancient Indigenous wisdom and the latest scientific breakthroughs in fields like neuroscience and epigenetics to co-found Brave Spaces. Drawing on the latest scientific insights from neuroscience, epigenetics, psychotherapy, and global Indigenous wisdom, Brave Spaces facilitate programs that provide the tools, insights, and support you need to start living a life of connection and purpose. Now, quickly, before we dive in, we have just moved house, which means that the way we have been recording has undergone a little bit of a transformation. We've been testing out a new platform, and as a result, the sound isn't quite at the standard that we would normally have for the DNA of Purpose podcast. It's perfectly audible, but we're just still needing to make a few tweaks in order to get it back to that world-class level, which we are used to from Supernova Tribe Studio. And in addition to that, as a result of these changes, our scheduling is about a week behind. So we will be dropping an episode today and also doing a catch-up episode next week before rolling back into our normal programming. Now, without further delay, let's welcome Andrew Leach to the podcast.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you for having me here. And hello to everyone tuning in. I appreciate the ability to spend a bit of time with you and connect around a passion of mine, which is purpose.
We share that passion. Andrew, I'm going to kick off with a question that I ask all of my guests. In recent times on my personal journey of growth, I've often found that if I don't have the answers, sometimes it's more powerful to focus on asking better questions that will intuitively lead me to the solutions I am seeking out. Yeah. And so with that in mind, I'm curious to know what question is currently guiding your life and your purpose forward at this exact moment in time?
That's a great question. What question is guiding my life at the moment? I guess from a professional perspective, it's really about how to amplify the work that we're doing. I think I've spent probably the last 13, 14 years creating and kind of coming up with some great work, I think. And now it's about, I think I've understood over the last couple of years, it's about how do we now amplify that. So that's something that's really high on my mind, because it feels like we need, as humans, we need a bit of help at the moment. And I'm not saying I'm the only one to do that, but, one of many to help with the understanding. And the other thing, that's high on my mind is I'm a father of 2 boys, and how do I support them as they move into manhood? They're teenagers, one a late teenager and another one just embarking on teenagerhood. And it's how do we bring up men in this world to be the best versions of themselves? So they're the 2 key things for me at the moment.
What lucky boys. But I mean, overall, it sounds like you're helping so many people to step into a higher potential and become the best versions of themselves.
Oh, look, that's the total drive behind Brave Spaces. We set ourselves a pretty lofty target of, helping 1 million people lead a more purposeful and connected life. So we need to find now how we're going to do that on a bigger scale.
Yeah, well, as I've said to you in our, discovery call prior to this podcast, I was deeply moved by the process of Brave Spaces. Honoured to have you on the podcast today to be able to break that down a little further. And I have no doubt that you will achieve your mission of really being able to help 1 million people to, enable connection and to discover their purpose and all of the amazing, rich things that you are creating sacred containers for. Now, on that note, there is just so much that I want to dive into today. But before going there, I'm really curious to understand a little more about your unique journey and the unfolding of your purpose. Now, I know that the first 15 years of your career was spent as a professional dancer, performing in some of the most prestigious venues in the world before diving into the world of psychotherapy. You also spent time learning about ancient Indigenous knowledge and spent extensive time with the Indigenous people of Australia and abroad, whilst also studying energy medicine. Now that's a lot. And in some ways, the world of dance seems so far away from, say, psychotherapy or spending time in Outback Australia, which is why I'm really curious to ask you, what has been the golden thread for you in all of those experiences, and how does that thread inform your purpose today?
Wow, that's a great question. I think, if I look back at my dancing time, it was really about, mastering something that was almost impossible to master, because no matter how good we were at it, I guess the specific form of dance that I ended up doing was called adagio, which is a mixture of classical ballet and acrobatics with a partner. And, we'd spend hours and hours and hours rehearsing and, always trying to reach that level of perfection. The thing that I loved most about my dancing days was, and that's from, the very beginning, studying, classical ballet at the Australian Ballet School right through to the work that we did, was working with another person and the connection that created. So I never really enjoyed dancing by myself and doing solos. In fact, I found them quite scary. And there was a bit of a void. But what I did love was dancing with another. And I think that has been something that I've kind of held and wanted to recreate as I've moved through the next parts of my life. So I think having a partner, a business partner, is important to me. And Jack, my amazing business partner at Brave Spaces, it's a joy working with her every day. She has an amazing history as well of, she brought Anytime Fitness into the country with her brother, so has had an extensive business career. But I think it's that sense of connection and connecting with others that really drives me. I love connecting and being connected, and deepening connections with people is really something that I long for. Like, it's a real longing I have, that depth of connection that we can create.
Yeah, and look, I'm going to touch a little bit later in the conversation on your experience learning from Indigenous Australians. But as you're talking, I can't help but feel that if we look at, a lot of the Indigenous worldview around this idea that our identity is informed by who we are with and where we are located, and that there is this kind of innate connection, I can kind of see how dance would become an extension of that, particularly when you're needing to essentially find a rhythm and a flow through music and movement with another person, that you would feel that deep symbiosis with another human through dance.
Absolutely. And I think there's a couple of things in what you've just mentioned. One of the most fundamental things that the Indigenous people talk about is our ability or not to be present in this moment, because that's where every possibility exists. Now, I learned how to do that when I was dancing because I needed to. That's not my nature. My nature is that I can easily zip off into any other part of the universe and occupy it quite easily. So when I finished dancing, one of the things that I noticed was, there wasn't that time in the day where I really had to be fully 100% present for the safety of my partner and to be able to do what I needed to do. So I then was really curious about, how do I do that for myself? How do I become present and grounded in this moment? Which I think has also been another driver of a lot of the work that I've been uncovering is really that ability. How do we come back to this moment and be in this moment where we are? As you said, where we are has everything that we need. And we're often so worried about getting somewhere that we forget the dance that can happen here with the person we're with and the area that we're in. So I think that's a fundamental driver as well, that whole thing around presence and being grounded.
Absolutely. And, the connection between what it is to be present and in relation with another person, be that a business partner, as you've said, or in some cases it might even be an audience. Since we're talking about dance, it reminds me of the concept in flamenco known as duende, which is essentially a moment of transformation that happens when the performer connects at a deep level with the audience. And it is said that to be able to reach this state of this kind of heightened state of duende, something in the dancer needs to die, be it a story or be it something that they need to surrender to really be able to tap into this presence that you're talking about as the portal to this connection.
Oh, look, I couldn't agree more. It is totally about, the more I go into all of this work and, the psychotherapy, the Indigenous wisdom, all of it, it just comes back to the same thing, our ability to firstly understand, how do I get back into my body? And then how do I trust that without the story? Because our brain's going to always want to make a story up about something or other and give something meaning. How do I let my body live that moment of connection in a way that is different than what we're taught. And I love the example you used around the flamenco. I lived in Spain for 9 years and have a massive piece of my heart is around the flamenco dance and the Spanish culture.
I love that. Now, you mentioned earlier your connection with your co-founder, Jacinta McDonald, who, as you said, has an extensive background as a very prominent Australian entrepreneur, having founded Anytime Fitness.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to know, how did you and Jack come into each other's worlds, and how did your intersection of experience lead to the birth of Brave Spaces?
So we met probably about 3 years ago now, and had various kind of interactions with each other over that period. And I remember it was probably about 18 months ago, Jack, and she'd experienced some of the work that I was doing, and we had a conversation, and I'd been thinking about how do we get more people involved in this work, because I had a business taking this work into businesses. And really focusing around relationships and communication and a little bit of leadership. And Jack basically said to me, look, I think it's about time that we got this out to a much broader audience. And I remember feeling really excited and really scared at the same time, because I looked in her eye and I thought, she's not talking about a small, broader audience. She's talking about a big, broader audience. So then we just set about, creating the business. We were really conscious about what we wanted to create and how we wanted to be with each other, which was a great experience. And we gave birth to it in July last year. And, like any business, we thought that it was going to be something. And as it starts to unfold, it's turning into similar to what we thought, but also at the same time, there's a whole lot of opportunities that are appearing that we didn't expect as well. So we're now, trying to navigate how all that works, and it's been an amazing journey so far, and we, stay connected. So it's been really amazing.
What you just said before in relation to the opportunities now kind of coming towards you and you magnetizing these new opportunities really reconnected me to an idea I've explored a lot around simply, if we show up for our purpose will show up for us. And, I've seen it time and time again. If people lean in, they tend to attract the opportunities along the way and really build that momentum and that magic.
Oh, look, one of the things, I love in our programs is really challenging people to get clear about what they want, and then literally allowing the universe to have your back. And also remember that there is magic in play. I think it's one of the things that we've forgotten about in our culture.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I talk a lot about with people is, the universe will totally have your back. If you're clear about what you want, it will support you. And if you're unclear about what you want, it will support that too. So it's that
a big
level
reflection, a big mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I think I'm going to have a bad day, guess what? I will. So I think that there is a lot of that at play that we forget, but once people are reminded of it, they remember how powerful it is just to be really clear. And sometimes that can be scary to be clear and voice, I think, what you really want.
In looking at the differences between Western perspectives and Indigenous perspectives, I think it is fair to say that the Indigenous do connect with the magic of the universe, this kind of creative power that we're talking about in a much more natural way than we do in the West, where we tend to kind of intellectualize things. I heard Tyson Yunkaporta, I interviewed probably about 2 years ago now, and he had framed it that there's that, I may not pronounce his name correctly, but Descartes saying, which essentially says, "I think, therefore I am," and that through the Indigenous worldview, the difference is I am located, therefore I am. And then when we are located, we are innately able to connect with the magic of the land. So with all of that in mind, what I'd love to hear from you is how your time learning from Indigenous Australians and also Indigenous cultures abroad has really informed your worldview, but also laid, I guess, a foundation for the Brave Spaces program.
Oh, look, just touching on what you were saying before I go a little bit into that, one of their fundamental beliefs of Indigenous cultures around the world is that we are dreaming our life and our world into existence. So we're in partnership with the universe. And I think, if you look at where quantum physics is at, it's essentially telling us that. And that's one of the things, that in the work that we've created with Brave Spaces, we've taken the best science that we can find and also that Indigenous wisdom. And one of the really interesting things is science is at the point where they're saying, as they understand more about Indigenous wisdom, they're saying, oh, guess what, you're right about that. And of course they're saying, well, yeah, we've been around a long time and we've kind of had enough time to work it through. I guess the most, I was lucky enough to meet an elder out in Central Australia, Frank Ansell, and he's a healer and Nunkara of the Arunta people. And I remember sitting with him, it came about, as all these things do, by a whole lot of different coincidences, and we ended up, a friend of myself and another guy, and the three of us went out and we ended up spending 2 weeks with Frankie. And I remember having my brain literally blown apart in the first day and a half, just sitting and listening. He wasn't lecturing, but it was just that kind of sitting in a riverbed around a little fire and talking about life, and I'm starting to understand the depth of understanding of who we are, which really blew me away. And, that, I guess the main thing that I've learned over the years is we're not disconnected from anything. We are connected to everything. If we're able to just slow down a little bit and remember that, then there's a magic that starts to unfold, not only externally, but inside of us. Most important, we find that place of calm, of settled, feeling, good inside our skin, that we are a part of something much bigger. And I mean, it's hard to describe over the last 12, 13 years, all that I have learned. We've taken many, many groups out to Central Australia and continue to do that every year. It's hard to describe. But I was taken, we started up again last year in September, and I was amazed again at the transformation that happens with people. And it's not through what we do. It's about really getting everyone to slow down, and the land out there is so powerful. It brings everyone back into their bodies. And once we're in our bodies, we have access to this incredible wisdom, inner wisdom of our own. And that's part of a big part of the work for Brave Spaces, is getting people out of our head, down into our bodies to access all of that amazing wisdom that our body holds, which is hard to describe. It's a felt thing. But once you feel it, you can't not feel it.
And I mean, I'm going to tap into this in my question relating to purpose.
Yeah.
However, I believe that to truly experience purpose, to experience that depth of fulfillment, and to connect to it at a visceral level, we need to really become open to this body wisdom, this body intelligence that you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, we're starting to understand a lot more about our mind. One of my favorite people in the world is Dan Siegel, Dr. Dan, who has, taken this whole thing to a much greater level. And he's really led the way in helping us understand in the West that our mind is our brain, our heart, and our gut. A mixture of all of those things. And it's only when we're really in our body and able to access that, that we do start to understand who we truly are as humans. We are much more than we've been led to believe, and we are much more than we think we are. But it's a question of coming down into our body, not looking up, I think, is one of the things that I've learned and try and help people with.
So let's have a chat about the Brave Spaces program, where you explore what you refer to as the 5 keys for creating a more connected and purposeful life. So those keys include self-awareness, self-regulation, connection, purpose, and integration.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to explore each of these keys independently. However, from my understanding and our initial chat, these keys work as a system. So to set this up, can you share with me a little bit more about the system of the 5 keys, and then we'll go through and unlock those keys?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, what I wanted to do when we created these keys in this pathway over the last 12, 13 years and refined them with Jack was to find a way that we weren't just saying to someone, come and do a workshop, you'll feel great for, a day, a couple of days, a week, a month, and then, we want you to come back again. We wanted to give people a pathway and a map, because I think that's what a lot of people are looking for, is a map to discover themselves and a map for the journey, that internal journey. What does it look like, and how do I navigate my way through that? So over the years, that's where I've landed, and that's where we've landed. So, we always begin with self-awareness, because for me, that's the beginning of everything, for us to become aware of what's happening inside of my inner world. Now, that's something that a lot of people may not have ever thought about, their inner world, but it has a massive impact on what's happening externally. So then we move through each of the 5 keys. And I guess, the last one, the integration piece, is really important as well. So how do you embody that work rather than it just be a mental concept? And that's a super important part. So each of the steps are really important, but it's about creating that map and for people to discover their own inner world, I guess, is the easiest way to describe it.
So let's delve in to the concept of self-awareness as our starting point. Now, on one hand, the idea of knowing oneself could be viewed as a simple idea. And if you are someone who is asking questions about your life purpose, then by the very nature of that question, you have been in a process of self-reflection. That said, the complexity of this key is nuanced in that it involves not only a conscious awareness of our patterns and operating systems, but an acknowledgement of the fact that there are parts of who we are that are deeply unconscious, that are informing how we show up in the world. So given this key is a starting point in the Brave Spaces process, how do you go about building a bridge for people to step more deeply into the embodiment of self-awareness? Yeah.
So I think, the very first thing that we talk about is our level of presence and how present we actually are. And I think most people, one of the first questions I ask in any of the program, have you been with someone who is present? And most people say, yep. How does it feel? Great. I feel connected. I feel valued. I feel heard, all of those great things. Have you been with someone who isn't present? Yep. Everyone starts to laugh. Yep. Just before, today, whenever. How do you feel? We feel disconnected. We feel, unheard, unseen. So we start with presence, because that for me is the fundamental thing. How present can I be? Now, with that, we start to develop what we call the observer self. So it is that ability to observe. And, what's amazing, when we start to observe without judgment, without being good or bad or right or wrong, we observe that a lot of our thoughts are the subconscious thoughts. Up to 80% of our thoughts are subconscious. And, they're not particularly kind. So they're built on fear. So another key thing we use is the drama triangle in that fear paradigm, helping people understand it. And I think when we take away the mystery of fear, because that is our prime driver, and we start to map that out, people start to go, oh, okay, it's not as scary as I thought. So we're lifting up the bonnet almost, or looking under the hood and going, what's driving us? And then we look at the 3 core beliefs that, shape all of us. I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, or, I'll be betrayed, someone's going to screw me over. And it's with those beliefs that we create the stories of our lives, which in the end don't serve us. So, our question to people isn't, is it good or bad or right or wrong? Does it serve you? So once we get that observer self up and running and you're able to observe what's true, how often am I telling myself, well, you're not good enough, you're not worthy, you don't deserve this. Is that serving me? So it's a lot of curiosity and questions, I think, is the self-awareness. Questioning our beliefs, questioning, gee, I wonder why, I think that. So taking away the fear of fear itself. And I think that's one of the key things, and one of the bits of feedback we get about that initial self-awareness piece is it provides a map. It provides some way of understanding what's happening in our inner world. So we have the fear, and then we also look at the opposite of that, which is the love as well.
One of the things that I have been playing with lately is becoming more self-aware of my triggers and trying to more consciously transform those triggers into transformation moments, to kind of lean in and go, yes, I am so triggered by this person, this thing, this environment, whatever it is. And how do I actually start listening to that trigger and kind of get below the surface? Sometimes I do well, other times I do, dismally and go and hide away in my bedroom and have a tantrum. What is your advice, because I think that is, it is a moment of, it's an opportunity to grow if we can learn to sort of notice these things, but it's not necessarily easy work.
Oh, look, it isn't. And I think, the key thing is starting to understand, one, that we have a choice. First off, we always have a choice. The story that we might have and may have run many times in our life around those triggers may not serve us. But where we begin is helping everyone understand we always have a choice. So, be it, in a relationship, if someone says something that typically you would react to in, a frustrated or angry or upset way, stepping back and going, well, hold on a second, what would I like to create here, as opposed to what have I done over and over and over again? So that's a really key piece. I always have a choice in how I'm showing up. Now, we'd all love to think that, once we've done a little bit of self-awareness, okay, I'll never do that again. Of course we will. Another key kind of tool that we, support people around is a reflective practice, so that you're able to, at the end of the day or wherever it is, just look back and look at the triggers that happened where you weren't as aware and able to regulate yourself as you would like to have. And remembering now, okay, what's another option? So now that happened, not was it right or wrong, good or bad, what's another option? How could I have showed up differently? What could I have done differently? What then happens to our brain is that it starts to rewire. It starts to go, oh, that's right, I've got a choice. So that's really a massive part of the work, is remembering, because the subconscious is just reaction. This happens, bang. This happens, bang. Remembering consciously that we always have a choice. So how would I like to respond? And does it serve me? So I think those are two key things, that whole thing about choice and then reflecting.
And I guess that is a really beautiful segue to key number 2. Not that they're in any particular order. This is not linear, but for the purposes of the podcast, let's move into self-regulation, because in order to be able to make a different choice, we need to kind of self-regulate somewhere in between, which was, based on my understanding, was the ability to essentially influence one's own operating system, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and it may even include the ability to be able to regulate our nervous system. Yeah. Now, as usual, from a theoretical perspective, this all seems fairly self-explanatory, but the reality is that this work runs really, really deeply. So with that in mind, I'd love to understand more about your take on what it is to self-regulate.
So I think, I think a large part of it is around our feelings and our emotions, and how in our world I know for myself, my emotional upbringing was really whatever you're feeling, don't. So, there's generations of us that have tried to mask our feelings and pretend that they're not there. Now, that doesn't work, and one of the reasons why emotional intelligence now is so important and so popular is there's a lot of us wanting to go back in and go, well, what's happening here? Now, a couple of things, if we look at it from the scientific perspective, our ability and, the way that we can self-regulate is not as complicated as we think. Literally naming an emotion. So, we do a lot of body scanning, a lot of grounding. Just become familiar with your emotions. Give it a name. Science tells us as soon as we name an emotion, it dissipates. So that's one key thing. Understanding that, these are things in our body that we have control of. The other is directly from, the Indigenous wisdom. And one of the things I learnt was, no one can actually make us feel anything. No one can make us feel anything. It's always a choice that I'm making, most often a subconscious one. So when we start thinking, well, if a feeling is in my body, that means I created it, which also means that I can regulate it. So it's all about the ownership of, we come back to that choice again. So if this thing that's sitting in there and I'm not sure what it is, if I own it, name it, and start to recognize that it's literally just energy based on my thinking, then it becomes a lot less mysterious. So there's some of the processes that we take people through. It's really about demystifying our emotions and feelings because, whether we like it or not, they really do drive a lot of our behaviours if left unchecked. And if left in the subconscious, that's a massive driver. Which then has an impact on our nervous system, our body. We look a lot around, the impact that has on our cells. Dr. Bruce Lipton, a great, pioneer in epigenetics, someone who understands not only, do our emotions and feelings impact our mental health, but also our physical health at a cellular level. So, again, it's about helping people understand that and then giving them tools in how to deepen their understanding of it. Hopefully that makes sense.
Oh, it absolutely makes sense. Where, in reflecting on what you've just shared, where my mind has gone is to the power of this work from a healing perspective, because I imagine in working with clients and looking at, say, self-regulation and really then starting to connect people to the depth of their emotion, it must lead people towards trauma, towards held emotion, stored emotion in the body. Yeah. So, how do you go about working with someone at that level in this process? Because it is really quite deep work.
Look, it is deep work. And I think the most important thing that I've learned over the years is always start at the beginning. So we go back to self-awareness. So if we set that, meeting people where they're at first, not us coming in going, right, let's dive in and see what's going on in there. That's one of the things I didn't like about
so there's safety in the process.
Absolutely. And it's not about pushing anyone anywhere. It's really about starting to give them the awareness of what's happening in their body. And I think really just being able to hold the space to let it happen. And then when it does happen, normalizing it. All of these emotions as humans are totally normal. One of the biggest things I think that holds us back is we're taught that we shouldn't feel, sad or angry or frustrated. They're totally normal and they're a part of our human existence. So once people start to get that, and, it can be really scary. I remember the first, when I was studying psychotherapy.
It's like opening Pandora's box. What is there?
And the fear is, that, if I start, if I'm upset and I start crying, will I ever stop? Oh, yes, you will. Yes, you will. In fact, once that energy's moved, most of the time what sits under that is joy or happiness or a different emotion. So we start to understand then that, they're itinerant. Feelings and emotions, they want to come and go and inform us of, either what we're thinking or what's happening around it. But, we're really, really gentle with people. I'm not a fan at all of the let's go in and break someone open kind of model.
There's a gentleness to the process.
Absolutely. It's about helping people come back into their bodies and then supporting them in that. And however that shows up. So, it's not about what we think should happen. It's about what's actually happening for them.
Yeah. And in coming to the third key, knowing that you have a group of amazing people that you are connected to, the third key being connection, and that you are in it together.
Look, I think it's such an important thing. And, there's so many layers to connection, and it's hard to know, in this short amount of time we have, where to start. For me, it comes back to our heart. And it's all about our heart. And now that's something that philosophies and religions have told us about forever. And we're only now really starting to understand the power of the heart. There's an amazing organisation called the Institute of Heart Math, which devote all of their time and energy to understanding the physical heart, but also the energetic heart. And when we start delving into that, this is the higher level part of it, I guess. We are all connected all the time. And as humans,
heart coherence, I believe it's called.
Heart
coherence. Yeah.
And we are, which again, the Indigenous people have told us, we are all connected all the time. So there is no separation. Now, how does that play out in our life? As humans, we are wired for connection. We long for connection. We want to belong in a relationship, a group of people. Yet our subconscious is busy at work creating disconnection through that whole fear paradigm of I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, and someone's going to screw me over. So we're busy creating what we're not wanting, and that creates that whole disconnect with people. Our longing to connect, and you see people when they are able to connect deeply, it's a different person. And when we realise that, that is something that's important to us, it's a massive thing.
Absolutely. And I think bringing awareness again to our Western world and the social structures that surround us, that in many cases leave us, feeling lonely and isolated and disconnected, whether it be the cement jungles that we build ourselves that disconnect us from nature, or the disconnection from community and tribe. What we're facing now, and research is actually showing us this, that there is actually like a loneliness epidemic in society at this point in time. And there is a whole body of research around that. Where what I love about your process, and again, drawing on the Indigenous wisdom, it's like about coming back into the truth that we need each other. We are hardwired to have connection.
Yeah. it's such an important thing, and I think we're taught from a young age, we have to choose almost between our head and our heart. And for me, that's one of the most, the saddest things, because we lose a massive part of ourselves if we're thinking that everything needs to be looked at through a logical brain. Then we lose our ability to connect with each other at different levels. And, our brain is always going to create disconnection. And, if you look, we have all the mechanisms and all the tools now to be more connected than ever, yet we're more disconnected. So it is a massive, massive issue, I think.
So let's move on to the core topic of this podcast, being purpose. Yeah. A week or so ago, you and I had a quick discovery call, and what I loved in that conversation is that together we kind of unpacked the idea of purpose as a life force, or as an energy that sits within the different aspects of who we are. And, on that note, in looking at what we were talking about before, about sort of opening Pandora's box and doing the healing work, I think in some ways purpose almost is a healing paradigm in that sense, in that when we are able to tap into this energy and clear through those emotions or whatever is blocking the energy of purpose, that's when we're able to more deeply connect to, that magic essentially in our lives. Now, when we had our initial discussion, we looked at something that we spoke about earlier in the conversation, which is the intellectual aspect of purpose, which is essentially our ability to make meaning of our story of purpose, or to articulate our why. But we also looked at purpose as, a form of intuition, an expression of the heart, and also as an internal, almost instinctual guidance system. In other words, a life force that exists within us and that dances through us.
Yeah.
And so what I'm curious to know is, if we view purpose as an embodiment and as an energy that is communicating through us in this way, how can we learn to tune in to that energy in order to be able to facilitate personal transformation and to lean into a new level of service in our lives?
Look, I think, we describe purpose as an inside job. And by that,
I love that.
The only way we know that we're on purpose is how we feel. And the feelings that help us understand that we feel ease, flow, and enthusiasm. Now, the opposite is true as well. So, when we're not on purpose, our feelings let us know that. So we feel angry, stuck, and frustrated. So the very first place we start with that is, it's a little bit harsh, but I remind people that the universe doesn't care whether we're on purpose or not. The sun is going to go up and the sun is going to go down. The only way we know is how we feel. When we get on purpose and we get clear about it, the universe will totally have our back, just as it will do if we're not on purpose as well. It'll totally support us in the choice that we make. Now, if we have a relatively simple model. The first question is, what are you good at? And it always amazes me because it's kind of indicative as to how far we've come away from living on purpose. Because when I ask people that question, it's invariably the same response. People look up to the ceiling and go, oh, wow, gee, I don't know. Which I find, amazing. And I include myself in that because, I wish I could say that I spend all of my day living on purpose. I don't, because my subconscious brain is telling me all the time as well, blah, 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 blah. So that's the first barrier to overcome. Imagine that we could be good at something and actually, be energized by something and feel good about that, because we get used to the whole thing of, well, I've got to do this and I've got to do that. I don't like it or don't want to do it, but that's what life is. So there's a few different barriers to break through. then starting to get people, when we get clear about, we end up with a phrase which basically says, this is what I'm really good at, and these are the qualities that I bring when I'm doing that. Now, what does that do? It gives us a context, because when I'm walking into that meeting, when I'm walking into wherever it is, all I need to remember, this is what I need to do right now. Because the bottom line is the universe is giving us an opportunity every moment to show up on purpose. And what it's saying to us is, look, here's an opportunity for you to bring your gift. If you do, great. If you don't, great. Here's another opportunity for you to bring your purpose and your gift. If you do, great. If you don't, great. So that's really what's happening when we look at how life works. And I think it's, that is super energizing when we can just walk into a situation going, this is all I need to do, is be me and bring my gift and have faith and trust in that.
Yeah, and I think what you just mentioned around the whole notion of just being yourself, we spend so much time thinking that we need to put all this work into discovering our purpose, or we're waiting for our purpose, or, I'm following this North Star that's all the way up and out there, where it's actually not. Your North Star is within you. It is who you already are. And just to simply know that is so liberating, because you no longer have to look outside of yourself for your gift. Your gift is actually waiting for you to uncover it within yourself. Absolutely.
And the universe is begging you to do so, because wherever you go, that's exactly what's needed. One of the kind of really the dichotomies of purpose is when we start talking about, so we uncover what the purpose is for people, and then we say, look, wherever you go, whatever you're good at won't exist. And that's exactly why you're there. And people kind of do a second take and say, what?
I love that.
But that's
it's
what's
such
true.
A simple filter, but it's so powerful.
And because I think the other interesting thing is, it stops us then judging everyone else for why they're not doing what I would do. Because what I would do, if that's my gift, they're bringing something else. So how about I just bring my gift and not look at everyone else through what I think they should be doing based on what I'm good at. So it's very liberating, I think, and it frees up a lot of that kind of worry and anxiety and all of the stuff that happens, and allows us, if we're able to tap into it, allows us literally to show up and be who we are. Now, that's not to say that, we're going to sit there and go, right, that's who I am. We're curious as humans, and our purpose changes as we go through life, and there's different parts of us that want to express. So we're always learning and growing. But
and I'm a firm believer that in some ways we're multi-purposed. In that my purpose with you in this conversation right now is fundamentally different to my purpose at 9 o'clock this morning, taking my daughter to school and supporting her through, starting at a new school. But both of those things presented an opportunity for me to show up in my purpose, to make a decision, not only based on my experience, but based on the people that I was with and where I was located. Because, and maybe this again is a nice segue to the next key, which is integration. But all of the things we've spoken about today, whether it be self-awareness, self-regulation, connection, all of these different things come together to enable these experiences and these purposes as they play out in our life. So let's talk about the integration piece.
Yeah. So, the integration runs, it's a thread through the whole program, because all the programs that we do are interactive, and it's really about how that, so, we put up a framework or whatever, but then it's about how does that interact with you? It's not what we think it should be, but how does that interact with you? So the key thing is embodiment. So for me, we could almost take either of those, integration or embodiment. And that's the key part. How do we embody this work? So it becomes not just a mental concept, but it becomes something that we've felt. Because when we've felt it, we can come back to it and we can recreate that feeling quite easily. It's when it stays as a mental concept, I think we run into trouble, because our brain gets hold of it and changes it around. And we'll go, oh, well, yeah, that was okay then, but it might not be what you're wanting to do now or what you're thinking now. And we change the stories. So it's really about embodying, and we give people the tools and the means to do that. So whenever people work with us, they walk away with a full toolkit. Now, we're also saying to them, this requires discipline and energy and effort, like everything, every endeavor. So it's not the fact that you've done, a 2-day, 3-month, 5-day retreat or whatever. It's about using the tools and remembering that it's a daily practice. So, the work never stops. One of the things at the very beginning when we work with people is there's no there to get to.
Yeah.
There's really...
You continue? That's fine.
There's not a there. So, setting people's expectations of we're never going to wake up one day and our life is sorted and I've got no dramas. But it's understanding that we are equipped. And that's one of the drivers of Brave Spaces. One of the things that drive us is our problems, and they seem more complex and more complicated. We already have the ability to deal with it. It's just that we've forgotten a lot of those tools that we have. They're all within us. So it's reawakening a lot of that to deal with the complexity that we're facing today, which I think, everyone would agree with.
Yeah, look, as a metaphor, I almost see you guys as being like a cocoon, in that the caterpillar and the butterfly have exactly the same DNA, but somewhere in the middle they go through this process of getting all mushy, not necessarily knowing what's going on, but there is a deeply transformative process going on. And at times, just like being in the cocoon, you can't see what's next at that point in time, but eventually you do pop out as a butterfly.
Yeah. Oh, look, I couldn't agree more. In the 3-month program we run, that is a deep dive for people to go really deeply into themselves. And a lot of the time it does require people to be brave, because, they don't know what's coming next and they don't know what's underneath the next layer. But we just keep encouraging them and holding that space. We keep saying, be brave, step in, just keep stepping in.
So that might be a good question to ask you is what does courage look like to you?
Oh, courage for me is about the heart, stepping forward with my heart open and willing to be with what is, not what I think should be or what I'd like to make it. It's really stepping into our heart, I think. And, if you think about the word itself, courage comes from the Latin heart.
Yeah, so it does.
I think it's not so much about force, it's about heart and opening our heart and being able to receive as well, courageous in our ability to take what we need.
And that's quite a poignant thing, because I think often we can be so good at putting energy out into the world, but terrible at receiving what we need to nourish ourselves and support our own work and our own purpose.
It's a massive thing. If I go back to the Indigenous world, there's an energetic shape around all of us, everything that's alive. And if I was to define it in our world, it would be, I'm very happy and willing to bring what I'm good at, and also happy and willing to take what I need, and not cutting any of those off, because there's plenty. But, trees have it as well. They don't think, oh, well, I should take less. No, they take what they need. Animals do the same thing. We're the only ones that kind of start distorting that energetic shape.
Yeah. So, Andrew, in looking at the Brave Spaces website, you have various programs from coaching to workshops, a 12-week live online facilitated program, and a 6-month immersion, which you just referenced.
Yeah.
I'm super curious to understand, how do you bring these keys to life within the programs? And if I was to sign up, what can I expect in the process?
So look, there's a few different ways of connecting with us. One of them is we run a 2-hour masterclass. The next one's coming up on February 20th.
Amazing. I'll pop that in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you. And that's really, because we understand people are at different places and we need to kind of build trust with people. So the 2-hour masterclass is giving people an understanding of each of those keys and also giving them enough tools to go away that they are going to be able to make a marked difference in their life. Now, for some people, that will be enough. They'll go, okay, great, I've got my fill, and I'll work on that for a little bit. Other people may become curious and go, okay, I want to do the 3-month live facilitated program, which is calling Owning Your Unique Path, which really leads up to the whole question of purpose. And that's where we kind of land. And that's a different thing. It's a deeper dive into, as a group, a lot of things that we may or may not have wanted to look at in our life, but also a lot of joy in those groups. There's a lot of love and support and connection, and ultimately everyone walks away understanding exactly what their purpose is and empowered to kind of forge through their life and live that. The 6-month immersion, that's really a whole other level, the circle, and that's people who have a different level of commitment. So I think we're trying here to support people where they're at, with their time constraints, their level of understanding, their level of commitment to personal development. And along with that as well, we have the 5-day retreats that we're running out to Central Australia with an Indigenous healer, which are incredibly transformative. So there's quite a broad menu, if you like.
Amazing. Look, I can't wait to dive in. It's been an absolute honour to be able to explore all aspects of Brave Spaces with you over the course of the conversation today. I'm curious to know, is there anything that you want to share with our audience that you feel is significant that you haven't already shared today?
Look, I think, for everyone to remember who we really are is, I think, a super important thing. And, if, for me, what's our life about other than really trying to find out who we really are? How powerful are we? If you think about what we're able to create and we're only putting roughly about 20% of our mind and energy to it, imagine what we could create as humans if we were able to shift the dial even to 50% of our conscious thinking and energy. So that for me is, never underestimate how powerful you are, we are, everyone is. And I think just try and keep lifting people up.
Absolutely. And so for anyone listening today who would maybe like to jump on to the 2-hour masterclass or learn more about your programs, where can they find you?
So if they go to bravespaces.com.au and click under the programs, they'll find all of those programs under the menu there. And it's a pretty simple process. You can just click join masterclass. For the longer programs, we like to have a chat just to make sure that it's the right thing for everyone. And same again with the retreats if you have a look, the Return to Wisdom one, bravespaces.com.au, or send an email to info@bravespaces.com.au. Any questions you have about anything that you're not sure of.
Andrew, thank you so much for joining me on the DNA of Purpose podcast. It has been such a joy to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I've really enjoyed, firstly, the conversation we had last week about, what this might look like. And I've really enjoyed your probing questions as well. They've made me think, which is awesome. There's something that I really love, and I thank you for that.
Oh, you are absolutely welcome. It was absolutely my pleasure and an honour to be able to ask questions of someone who is truly a master in their space and has so much wisdom, insight, and knowledge to offer our listeners. So I have appreciated your time and have so much gratitude for the conversation. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, as always, for dedicating your time to the DNA of Purpose podcast. As we conclude today's episode, I invite you to extend the conversation online. Feel free to reach out via LinkedIn or follow along at Rebecca Maclad, that is MAKLAD, on Instagram, where we're crafting a tapestry of stories, reflections, tools, and insights to empower your purpose-driven leadership strategy. I love feedback, and we always welcome guest suggestions. Should today's episode ignite a spark within you, reviews really do help us to continue to attract the world's most prominent purpose-driven leaders as our guests. And if you know somebody who would benefit from one of our episodes, then share that story with abundance. A big thanks to Supernova Tribe, who produce this podcast with style, and Guide Your Light, a network for podcasts with purpose.